President of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, and the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman review cooperation projects in oil, gas, and petrochemicals as part of the Venezuelan leader's tour to Saudi Arabia. And the French trade unions resumed a fresh day of mass demonstrations against President Emmanuel Macron's contested pension reform. And the Russian authorities denounced that Ukrainian forces attacked the Kakhova hydroelectric power plant in the province of Kherson, which destroyed the dam valves and caused the flooding of the village of Novaya Kakhova. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. On Tuesday, the President of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, and the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman reviewed cooperation projects in oil, gas, and petrochemicals as part of the Venezuelan leader's tour to Saudi Arabia. During the visit to the Arab Kingdom, the President Maduro assured that the terms of cooperation were evaluated during the meeting and reiterated the commitment to advance in the complementary work for the benefit of both nations. For his part, the Venezuelan Foreign Minister Iván Gil assured that during the meeting, the strategic association ties were deepened under the principle of mutual respect and self-determination of the peoples. Venezuela and Saudi Arabia are currently strengthening cooperation ties in energy matters. In the meantime, in his Twitter account, the Venezuelan president highlighted that they have a great network of strategic alliances for development, cooperation, and solidarity. Maduro affirmed that from Venezuela, they will always bet on working together and building a better humanity, and finally urged to continue advancing for a new world. In this context, on Monday, the Venezuelan foreign minister pointed out that bilateral relations between Caracas and Riyadh have several fundamental points, among which the Organization of Oil Exporting Countries, OPEP, stands out.
Let us remember that we are united by the principle of world energy trade, as OPEC said. We are also promoters of the OPEC Plus agreement, which has allowed us to stabilize the world oil market, even in difficult conditions such as the COVID-19 pandemic and the Ukrainian crisis. Thanks to this OPEC Plus agreement, stability is provided for both consumers and producers to maintain a constant and safe flow of the main world energy. And we have also been reviewing the multilateral agenda. We share the same principle of defense of the United Nations Charter. We share the defense of the self-determination of the peoples. We share the condemnation of unilateral coercive measures. That is to say, it has been a truly global agenda with many points on the agenda. And how good it is that we are strongly relaunching a new stage in this relationship that starts from this moment onwards.
The Prime Minister of Cuba, Manuel Marrero Cruz, arrived on Tuesday in Russia for an official visit with the purpose of expanding and consolidating bilateral relations, which have been maintained uninterruptedly from 1960 to the present. The Cuban Prime Minister's trip to Moscow is part of the expansion and consolidation of ties, especially in economic and commercial issues. Marrero will stay from June the 6th to 17th and will complete an extensive program, which will include his participation in the city of Sochi, in the Eurasian Intergovernmental Council, and the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum to begin on June 14th. The Cuban Prime Minister arrived in Russia accompanied by Deputy Prime Minister Ricardo Cabrizas Ruiz, the Minister of Foreign Trade and Foreign Investment, the Ministers of Public Health, Tourism, Energy and Mines, and Transport, as well as the Minister of President for the Central Bank of Cuba. And this new rapprochement follows over 60 years of bilateral relations. Cuba and Russia continue to enhance the ties. On April, both nations held sessions of Business Committee and the Intergovernmental Commission of both countries in the midst of the siege imposed by the West. A total of 14 agreements, contracts, and memorandums were signed between the two countries. Moscow and Havana also pondered and bolstered cooperation in the energy sphere, construction, agriculture, agroindustry, and tourism, among others, as there are prosper opportunities for business persons and officials of the two governments. The meetings in Havana were preceded by the visit to the island of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, in April this year, and the visit to Moscow in November of 2022 of the first Secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Cuba and President of the Republic, Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez, who had a meeting with the President Vladimir Putin. The Chinese embassy in Honduras officially opened on Monday, marking a significant milestone for diplomatic relations. In this sense, Chinese and Honduran diplomats reaffirmed that the opening of the embassy represents a new chapter in the bilateral ties between the two nations. Over the past 2 months, since the establishment of diplomatic relations on March 26, Chinese diplomats have been focusing towards the occasion, engaging in various sectors in the South American country. They held discussions with government officials, members of parliament and media outlets to foster a deep understanding of the country's development. The efforts played a crucial role in advancing early achievements in bilateral economic, trade and cultural cooperation.
The opening of the Chinese embassy in Honduras is a milestone marking new achievements of our work in Honduras and also highlighting a step forward in bilateral relations.
In El Salvador, the Attorney General indicted on Monday former President Alfredo Cristiani for the massacre of 6 Jesuit priests at the Central American University 34 years ago. The prosecutor office reported that according to the testimony of a now-deceased eyewitness, Cristiani was present at the site where the crime was decided, agreed to it, and authorized it. There are another 8 people accused, including Rodolfo Porker, the former lawmaker and defense minister, currently at large, who had been incriminated by an eyewitness of offering 1 million colones in hush money so that Cristiani's participation nor that of the high military commanders will be mentioned. On November 16, 1989, death squads killed 6 Jesuit priests, 5 of them Spanish, along with 2 women, for being advocates of a peaceful solution to the conflict between the government and the Broad Front for National Liberation, Farabundo Martí. And on Tuesday, Peru's designated President Dina Boluarte testifies before the Attorney General in the preliminary inquiry for the deaths of demonstrators during anti-government protests held from December 2022 to March 2023. Last week, Boluarte said she was willing to testify to clarify the facts that led to the death of at least 49 people during the protests against her government following the dismissal and the arrest of the former president Pedro Castillo. Boluarte said she will only be testifying before Attorney General Patricia Benavides because she is the only competent authority involved in the inquiry. The preliminary query for the prosecutor's office against Boluarte and several of her ministers and former ministers is for alleged crimes of genocide, homicide, and serious injuries committed during the demonstrations in the regions of Apurímac, La Libertad, Puno, Junín, Arequipa, and Ayacucho. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find the news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Ecuador, residents of the areas in the Esmeraldas province affected by recent heavy rains and flooding have urged the President Guillermo Lasso to provide them with humanitarian aid. For the last 12 days, the Esmeralda province has witnessed non-stop rains associated with the La Niña weather pattern. Rivers have overflowed and prompted the evacuation of over 500 others. Meanwhile, another 1,467 people had to be rescued from their homes when the water reached reach a height of 3 meters. The floods have also ruined thousands of hectares of crop fields. Authorities report 11,750 people affected by the rains and damages to 2,895 houses. And although the President Guillermo Lasso traveled to the area pledging assistance, residents have told reporters they haven't seen neither the president nor the promised aid. Let's go to other topics. In the United States, former Vice President Mike Pence on Monday announced his candidacy as a member of the Republican Party for the 2024 presidential election, setting up the unusual scenario of two running mates turned rivals. Pence, who served as the vice president during Donald Trump's administration, is known as a conservative evangelical politician and a fierce opponent of abortion. After years of loyalty to Trump, he broke away from his circle when a mob of Trump supporters violently stormed the Congress on January 6, 2021 in Washington. Pence has criticized Trump for endangering his family and others that day. His entry into the electoral arena does little to alter a race in which Trump emerges as the favorite, followed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and then a handful of other candidates who are far behind in the polls. In the meantime, the 70-year-old activist, intellectual, and democratic socialist Cornel West said on Twitter that he will be a candidate for the 2024 contest. West confirmed he aimed to run for truth and justice and will be part of the People's Party. West also said that he will care about the quality of life, access to a job with living wage, decent housing, women having control over their bodies, health care for all, and finally he pointed out that his government will be fighting to end poverty, mass incarceration, and ending wars and ecological collapse. It should be emphasized that although there are alternative parties to the Democratic and Republican parties, Americans or U.S. citizens really only have two viable choices when it comes to electing their representatives. And French trade unions on Tuesday resumed a fresh day of mass demonstrations against the President Emmanuel Macron's pension reform. The mobilizations aim to pressure on the plenary session of the National Assembly to approve an appeal proposed by the opposition that will lead to the annulment of the pension reform. Meanwhile, the General Secretary of the General Confederation of Labour, Sophie Bennett, stated that France is an increasingly authoritarian country since the government is attempting to prevent the National Assembly from voting on the proposal that seeks to overturn the pension reform. In March, President Macron issued a decree to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64 by 2030 and to bring forward to 2027 the requirement to contribute for 43 years instead of 42 to receive a full pension. Despite widespread opposition, Macron signed the reform into law in April ahead of its implementation in September. On Tuesday, Laurent Berger, the trade union leader of the French Democratic Confederation of Labour, also said that the unions will continue to mobilize on all issues related to wages, purchasing power, and standard of living.
The unions will continue to say that we are against this reform that is unfair. We'll continue to mobilize on all issues relating to pay, purchasing power, standard of living. We've talked about housing, which is a fundamental issue. Every time I'm away, I hear about housing, you see, and so we are going to continue to work as an inter-union group on proposals, and then on the issue of pensions. We'll see what happens the day after tomorrow at the National Assembly, but beyond that we are not going to kid ourselves. I would love to tell you that we are capable of mobilizing another 2 million people next week. That's not true, because you cannot lie to workers. They are clear-sighted. Unfortunately, this reform has been enacted and the decrees 64 years old have been published. It is a reality. This doesn't mean that we accept it. No, it doesn't mean that we accept it, but the way in which we don't accept it will change. The form of mobilization will not be the same as those we have seen up to now.
And now we move on to other topics. On Tuesday, Russian authorities denounced that Ukrainian forces executed a series of attacks on the Kakhova hydroelectric power plant in the Russian province of Kherson, which destroyed the dam valves and caused the flooding of the village of Novaya Kakhova. The mayor of the region, Vladimir Leontiev, described the aggression as a serious act of terrorism and specified that the shelling affected the upper part of the installation so that the water of the river rose up to 10 meters. The head of the Kherson government, Andrei Alexenko, reported that 14 communities located near the Dnieper River, where more than 20,000 people live, are at risk of flooding. For his part, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said that the aim of the Ukrainian attack is to deprive Crimea of water. TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries using StoreSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Mohammed Haitham al-Tamimi, a 3-year-old Palestinian boy shot by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank last week, died on Monday after days of agony. His father is still recovering from mild injuries he suffered during the same attack, while his mother claims justice not only for her little boy, but also for all the Palestinian children killed by the Israeli forces.
The world is that I demand an international trial. Enough is enough. Every day we hear that a child has been murdered or a whole family has been murdered. That's enough. He was wonderful. I gave birth to Mohammed on the 8th month and he was incubated for a month. Afterwards we took him home. He was smart and funny. He was a good boy. Everyone loved him and he loved everyone and loved to play with everyone. He refused to come back home because he wanted to keep playing outside. God had chosen him. Thank God.
Iran's foreign ministry confirmed that it reopened diplomatic missions in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday. In a statement, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Nasser Kinani said that the Iranian embassy in the Saudi capital Riyadh officially reopened on Tuesday. Likewise, Kinani also said that the Consulate General and Representative Office to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in Jeddah will reopen on Wednesday. In this sense, the Iranian government appointed Alireza Enayari as its ambassador to Saudi Arabia. In March, Saudi Arabia and Iran reached Beijing a groundbreaking agreement to resume diplomatic relations and reopen their embassies and missions within 2 months. On April the 6th, the two countries officially announced the resumption of diplomatic relations with immediate effect. And shortages of food, medicines, and especially water are becoming extremely acute as clashes escalated in Sudan's capital just 2 days after a ceasefire deal expired. Fierce fighting between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces has intensified and spread across the capital area, comprising Khartoum, Omdurman, and Khartoum North, as well as in Darfur. The fighting has further exacerbated a already precarious humanitarian situation in the country, with power, gas, and communication being cut off, and food, water, and medicines running out. In this sense, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, stated that even before the conflict broke out, 17.3 million Sudanese lacked access to safe drinking water. It also said that the waterborne diseases and poor hygiene are leading causes of death in children under 5. On Tuesday, Kenyan police fired tear gas and arrested 11 protesters during a march in Nairobi against a new finance bill that critics said will increase economic hardships for the common. The proposed legislation provides for the creation of increase of taxes on a wide range of items, including fuel and food, as well as beauty products, cryptocurrencies, and social media influencers. Police fired several rounds of tear gas and arrested 11 people trying to disperse the demonstration. The Kenyan parliament resumed on Tuesday after recess and is expected to debate the legislation this week. In Kenya, mobilizations have been taking place on the 6th day of each month, and according to the organizers, the June demonstration had been notified to the police.
We are witnessing some chaos, which is not right for us as Kenyans. We need to live like we are in a country. We don't have to have fear that we are going to be chased because we are fighting for our rights. So, people are in the streets to demonstrate their anger, their frustrations, to demonstrate everything. We are suffering, in short. People need money, and that money is being taxed. You are being taxed twice for something that you need to get free. So we need that financial ability to.
The second session of the United Nations Habitat Assembly opened in the Kenyan capital of Nairobi, with delegates calling for sustainable urbanization globally. With the theme of a sustainable urban future through inclusive and effective multilateralism, achieving the Sustainable Development Goals in times of global crisis, the Assembly gathered leaders and ministers from 80 countries and over 1,000 representatives from the UN agencies and other non-governmental organizations. During the 5-day meeting, participants will discuss urban climate action, affordable housing, localization of sustainable development goals, finance, and urban crisis recovery. On the sidelines of the Assembly, there will be 30 relevant events and an urban expo where more than 50 exhibitors will showcase innovative solutions to challenges facing cities, including waste, pollution, and inadequate access to shelter. We have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.